The truce was over. The battle for Mexico City would soon begin. Scott ordered his engineers to scout the causeways into the capital. There were two possible attack routes, one from the south, through the gate of San Antonio, the other from the west, through the gates of San Cosme and Belén. On the western approach was an old flour mill called Molino del Rey. Rumors spoke of stockpiles of gunpowder there and a foundry where bells were being turned into cannons. Scott ordered the mill captured. The next morning, U.S. soldiers advanced on the mill, only to be surprised by a devastating volley of Mexican artillery. Soon, 3,500 U.S. troops found themselves engaged in a desperate battle with Mexican forces numbering 10,000. The bloody fighting raged for more than 2 hours. Time and again, U.S. soldiers charged into the fearsome fire. "Our troops fought like heroes," said Lieutenant John Peck, "and were mowed like grass." The battle for Molino del Rey cost Scott's forces some 800 casualties. Santa Anna's troops, the toll was far higher. Surprised by the persistence of the American attack, the Mexican forces slowly withdrew. As the U.S. troops searched the buildings, they were forced to accept a bitter irony. The cannon works so many had given their lives for did not exist. Inside the gates of Mexico City, the residents could only wonder when the final attack would come.
The church bells, which have been silent for many days, ring only to spread the alarm. Half the inhabitants crowd the rooftops to see what their fate may be, while the other half lock themselves indoors or rush to prepare to defend themselves to the last. Jose Fernando Ramirez.
Santa Anna stationed troops and artillery at the southern and western gates to the city and at Chapultepec Castle, which dominated the approach from the west. Now he waited to see from which direction the U.S. forces would launch their assault on the capital. For Winfield Scott, the stakes had never been higher. One of every 5 soldiers who had marched into the valley with him had fallen. Another costly battle like the one for Molino del Rey would be his last. Finally, Scott made his decision. He would attack Mexico City from the west. Against the advice of some of his officers, the general ordered an assault on Chapultepec Castle. General William Worth, one of Scott's best, most experienced commanders, had argued against an attack on Chapultepec. After the decision, he was heard to mutter, "We shall be defeated." At sunrise on the next morning, September 12th, U.S. artillery began blasting at Chapultepec's walls and rooftops. The shelling lasted 14 hours, but the Mexican troops held firm. Inside the castle, General Nicolas Bravo led 832 defenders, including more than 50 cadets from the military college. As shells ripped through the castle walls, Bravo urgently appealed to Santa Anna for reinforcements, but none arrived.
Santa Anna was constantly crossing the avenue, ordering soldiers to march, searching out the most dangerous places with reckless valor. I see him now, with his Panama hat, whip in hand, his overcoat and pants of whitest linen. His actions served no purpose, and just as he cannot be called a traitor, he cannot justly be considered a good general. Guillermo Prieto.
Colonel Juan Cano, who had helped fortify the Mexican positions at Cerro Gordo and Churubusco, worked desperately to repair Chapultepec's battered defenses. Cano knew time was running out. That night, he ordered his brother, Lorenzo, to take a sealed message to their uncle. It was a request for supplies, Juan Cano said, nothing more. When Lorenzo delivered the message, he learned otherwise.
Querido tío,
Dear uncle, I am certain that tomorrow
we shall die. I don't want my elderly parents to suffer the unbearable grief of learning that two sons have died at the same time. So I beg you, keep my brother Lorenzo from returning to my side. If he were here at Chapultepec, I am sure he would die with me. Juan Cano.
As dawn broke the next morning, the U.S. infantry advanced towards the castle. 500 volunteers made up the lead assault party. Following Army tradition, they called themselves the Forlorn Hope. With scaling ladders in place, the men scrambled up and into the face of the Mexican guns.
The Yankees climbed like goats. Clearing all the rocks and thicket, they came to the main door of the top plaza, trampling over everything. There they bumped into Colonel Cano, very resolute with gun in hand. Two of them asked for his sword. He shut their mouths with a gun. They fell on him and killed him.
At the height of the battle, 400 Mexican sharpshooters from the San Blas Battalion charged up the hill in a courageous attempt to join their comrades. But the reinforcements arrived too late, and most were cut down trying to reach the castle. The assault on Chapultepec ended in bloody hand-to-hand fighting that spared few of the Mexican defenders. Among those who fell were some of the Mexican cadets, the youngest just 13 years old. 6, it was said, chose to die rather than surrender. They would become national heroes in Mexico, the boy heroes of Chapultepec. Legend holds that one of them, Juan Escutia, wrapped himself in Mexico's flag and plunged to his death from the castle wall. From a nearby hill, 30 of the American deserters captured at Churubusco with the San Patricio Battalion watched, standing in mule carts with ropes around their necks. Finally, the U.S. flag was raised over the castle. Chapultepec had fallen. As the U.S. flag fluttered on the wind, the officer in charge of the execution gave the signal, and the carts lurched forward.
If there's ever a case where there's two different points of view, this is one, because to the Mexicans, the San Patricios are patriots. Few American military have any sympathy for them.
With Chapultepec Castle no longer a threat, Scott's troops battled their way up the two western causeways, taking both San Cosme and Belen gates by the end of the day. That night, Santa Anna met with his key commanders and several political leaders to decide the city's fate.
I think among the most tragic moments in the history of Mexico is that night, September 13th, when the last recourse, the last possibility, or nearly the last possibility, of defending Mexico City was exhausted. And evidently for General Santa Anna, it's terrible to have to accept that he's failed again.
A little after 11 o'clock, a carriage came for General Antonio López de Santa Anna. Later in the night, some 9,000 troops followed him out of the city. At 4 o'clock the next morning, September 14th, a delegation of city leaders went to Scott's headquarters and surrendered.